Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is Simran. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, Simran.
Welcome. I hope that you have soared over the prior full moon in a beautiful way and that you have entered into a new space. A space that allows you to have released a bit of what you were hanging on to and opening to more of the allness that you are. Speaking of new spaces, we're talking about spaces today. We're actually going to talk about portals. And so often as we are spiritual growth seekers and personal development enthusiasts, a lot of what takes place is this venturing into different places where we meet people, we meet experiences, we meet all types of energies, and the novice can sometimes land on something with complete surprise and be immediately awakened to a world that they never knew existed, while there are others that accumulate experiences and move from one place to another. 1111 has always been devoted to the journey of the soul, so it is the journey that is much larger than the ego or the human identity would desire of it. It is the interconnectedness of what links us in being in physical form to something that is almost otherworldly or non-wording in a way that we want to step into. I know in my own spiritual growth path, I have ventured into forests for vision quests. I have silently sat in the sacred valleys of Peru for weeks. I have hiked Vashnu Devi in India and done holy walks in Africa. And each sacred experience is a beautiful adventure in its own right, but it has so much to do with who an individual is being when they venture into these spaces, the level of care and respect and presence with which you enter, and also the intention. And sometimes we have what we think is a conscious intention, and we then have what is also the unconscious intention, which might be aligned or it might be misaligned. Today we are talking about portals, energetic doorways to mystical experiences between worlds. And this is a new book by Freddy Silva, part of the Common Sentience series. And we're going to be discussing quite a bit about what portals are and how you prepare for one, and the magic that exists inside of them. Freddy Silva writes within this book, "A portal is a supernatural opening in space and time, connecting thoughts, dreams, and potentially objects and people with myriad points in the universe, even multiple levels of reality. A portal is a contact station with the miraculous, an island of stability amid a landscape of chance. So where are these portals? How do we find them? What practical benefit could they offer us in the modern disconnected century?" Well, we're going to explore all of that, but let me tell you first a little bit about Freddy Silva if you're not familiar. Freddy is a best-selling author and leading researcher of ancient civilizations, restricted history, sacred sites, and their interaction with the consciousness. He is also the leading expert on crop circles. He has published 9 books in 6 languages and produced 14 documentaries. Described by one CEO as perhaps the best metaphysical speaker in the world right now, for 2 decades he has been an international keynote speaker and appears regularly on Gaia TV, History Channel, and BBC. Let's step into the portal that Freddy Silva is. Welcome, Freddy.
Good
So
morning.
nice to have you on 1111 Talk Radio.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
I want to start with that last question, which was part of your book. What practical benefit can portals offer in this modern disconnected century?
The ancients pretty much realized that incarnating into the physical world represents a kind of spiritual death. And the funny thing is, we spent the whole our lives reading books, ironically, and going, watching documentaries and gathering all the tools at conferences to help us realize what we're doing down here, that we're a soul in a body that's a bit lost sometimes. And the irony is that our predecessors located certain places on the land where the laws of physics, as we presently understand them, act a little bit differently, and they allow us for a few minutes or a few hours, or in some cases for a few days, for people to experience that sort of wholeness by connecting with a natural reference library. And it's something that we really need more than ever in terms of recent history, where much of the world has lost the plot. I mean, we're so connected to the physical reality of things, the cause and effect of day-to-day politics, without realizing that there's a bigger picture going on, and that picture involves our part in this drama, and also our experience and why we came down here. So we need these tools in order to be able to remind ourselves that out there in the natural world, there's something else lying that helps you sort of navigate the troublesome world. And I often watch people when I take them on tour to sacred sites, which essentially is where most of the portals hang out, and watch them appear on Monday when they get off the plane after a long flight across the world. And they're kind of hunched over with all their problems and all the politics and all of this. And 10 days later, they're different people. They've rubbed shoulders with these fine points of energy, and they suddenly begin to realize that you can take more control of your daily life. You can take control and sort of keep out a lot of the noise and bring in more of the signal into your being, and that allows them to take control of the situation. And I watch them go home, walking upright, looking very bright and cheerful. In fact, you can't get these people back on the plane. They don't want to go home. So we do need it more than ever right now, because I don't remember reading in any of my history books, and I'm an avid reader of ancient history, points where we have gone through major obstacles in history, whether it's world wars or so forth. But right now, it's like we really do need these tools to help us communicate with the bigger picture, so we can remain grounded in the middle of this change until we find a point of balance, and then we can move on to a new level of order. So I think that they're much more relevant than ever.
I want to go back to the statement that you said about the incarnation as a spiritual death. And you write in the book that it was imperative to repair the severed umbilical cord with the subtle universe, to reopen a connection and establish an advantage over this dominant and often suffocating physical domain. And I know you also share in the book many of the stories that indigenous people used or different cultures used to really separate oneself from society and go into a place where you literally learn to let go of that physicality. In a way, when people take these trips and they go to these places, they are leaving behind the physical world that they once knew to open into this unknown. Is there something special that takes place in that transition period from the world that they knew through that jaunt into that spiritual vortex or space or portal that is very uniquely similar among many people, and also something that is uniquely different?
Oh, it's a bit like being in a dream state, except the dream is very real. And today, the compulsion to go off to South America and indulge in ayahuasca and other drugs is an approximation of the process. But as any shaman will tell you, that is not exactly what is happening, because part of the process that you experience with these psychoactive drugs is that some of the imagery is really coming from your own chemistry. When you connect yourself to these ancient places which are essentially protecting these hotspots of energy. And they were done so that we would know where to find these portals when we forgot how to find them, which is nothing new to Aboriginal people, by the way. To this very day, they've never built anything. They can see these things on the landscape. They're so attuned. And so you go into these hotspots, and you literally, under the right conditions, in a sense of mindfulness, you do begin to leave the body in a certain way and then approach the other world, which is like the Egyptians described it as the room next door. We tend to think of these things as being very far away from Earth because we're so connected to the reality and the physicality of things, and we measure things. But actually, it's a bit like being in the next radio station along the dial. And you're crossing from one level of frequency into another. It's very real on its own level of reality, just as ours is. But unlike our level of reality, because we have no connection visually to what it appears, it can seem a bit strange. I'm speaking from experience where I've actually done this many times, not because I knew it was possible, but because I'm curious and I'm trying to be a better teacher about these ancient systems of knowledge. So I've actually experienced many of these things, and it is very magical. It's as though you're kind of watching yourself like a near-death experience, not forgetting the trauma that involves, but you literally are watching yourself from behind a big glass screen, and then you're in a much finer reality, which has more color, it has much more sound, and it's incredibly tangible and very personal. But at the same time, it seems a little bit just offset from your own reality. It's totally magical. And places like in France, where they mark these hotspots with these enormous stones, these menhirs and dolmens, they call them the places of the fairies. And the fairy world was used as a kind of metaphor to describe that you're going into this metaphysical reality in order to experience beings which are very alien to our sense of understanding. But at the same time, it literally is like walking in a parallel universe which mirrors ours, and yet is totally different. It sort of interpenetrates the world of the living. To quote the Egyptian book of Coming Forth by Day, this world interpenetrates our world. And in some cases, the overlap is very tangible. And what they were saying is that, again, referring to these hotspots, is that if you're very much aware of your environment and you're in a state of mindfulness, you can perceive this level overlapping on yours. It's a bit like people who are very sensitive, who are sitting in a room, they'll watch a ghost. That's kind of much like it is. And there's nothing to be afraid of, by the way. I mean, none of this poses any threat or worse. And in fact, it's actually there to gain our confidence and to help, if anything. So it's a bit like being in a room and watching this room full of people from another century walking through it. It can be a little bit strange when you first experience it, but once you get used to it, you realize that you're actually tapping into something that's very helpful and beneficial, and it becomes like a second language. It becomes second nature, like driving a vehicle. And you remember when you first got behind a driving wheel and you were petrified, and now we drive from A to B without even thinking about it. So it's something that becomes part of daily life in many people's mystical experiences.
Portals, energetic doorways to mystical experiences between worlds, is part of the Common Sentience series, and I have my own book, Signs, Sacred Encounters with Pathways, Turning Points, and Divine Guideposts, that is also part of that series. And much of my philosophy is that everything in this physical world is really a mirror, and that when we meet certain things, that we are reactivating a part of ourselves or finding something that mirrors to us. So when we are looking at portals and we're venturing into these sacred sites and these places, I would venture into them looking at them as a mirror to a part of my consciousness or an aspect of my being that I can rise into and tap into, that this helps to activate. Is that any way your experience when you have visited these places? Or share how these specific places activate or remind a person of who they really are.
Oh, I would agree. And the thing to bear in mind is that only a part of your soul actually incarnates into your body. I mean, on average, you get about 30% of who you really are, because the rest of you is in the other world having a jolly good time and having different experiences. And when we approach REM sleep, that's the moment when the place where you're sleeping on the face of the earth, the gravitational field is a bit weaker at that time of night. So it allows a kind of ribbon of energy to allow your soul to escape the trapping of the gravitational field of the Earth and go and rejoin your soul. And then when you come back an hour or two later, and you're kind of startled to be back on planet Earth at 4 a.m, you realize that you've spoken to people and you've been in places that your brain has no experience of. So how can you make this stuff up? Well, what's happening is you're going back into meeting yourself, completing your soul, and then going walkabout for all kinds of reasons. It could be to extract information, something that you're supposed to be aware of, or a warning. So this is essentially what the process is all about, is to try and reconnect to the yourself and to the bigger picture that's out there, which pretty much forms 99.9% of the universe. I mean, the physical world only represents a tiny fraction of this. So the idea is to use that time usefully. And many people in the mysteries teachings used to program their subconscious before they went to sleep, so that they knew that when they're about to leave and into that window of opportunity, they would set a sort of challenge or a question or an intention. For example, let's take me, for example. I mean, I'm always trying to learn what ancient places are all about and what they do, because so little is written about them. It's a bit of a detective hunt, really. And so I usually sort of make use of my time out of body to say, well, I'm trying to learn something specifically about this tribe or about this temple or about this culture in southern India. So I can, research this when I come back into my physical body and then teach it to the world at large. And again, it's getting into that training of doing this again and again. And it's amazing how useful it really becomes. And it's become what I call my research assistant that I don't have to pay for. I'm literally using part of my own being to go and collect information. And then you have to, the challenge is to remember what you've seen and what you've experienced in the other world and return the information into your body in a way that you can remember it. So it's always useful to have a pen and paper handy. And I know that anybody under 30 will have to Google pen and paper. I don't think anybody uses pen and paper anymore. Um, And so it makes a lot of sense. It becomes a very useful part of your daily life to be able to access this reference library where everything is stored and bring back that information for all kinds of purposes. And I know many healers that do this, and they also use the moment of meditation to, again, not just lie there and be still. You go into meditation with a purpose, and you just set that purpose. You don't expect anything. Expectation is one of the ways where we get trapped into receiving information that's really coming from our own need for validation. That comes from your own ego. If you expect nothing, you get a lot more valuable information because it's coming from a much more valuable and honest source. So this is what I mean by using these kind of places as a kind of toolbox that helps you make the best of your life here, so that when you interact with them and go on vision quests, the information that you receive is very tangible.
To draw again some parallels between portals and signs, when I look at the different stories and places that you share, because you have a variety of stories along with the stories of other people where portals can exist, many of which are in mountains and high temples. And then there are those portals that are on the ground, like Stonehenge with the large boulders and the stones, or different sites that are on land. And then there are others that are more catacomb-like or cave-like, or where we go into the earth. And I look at those again as the higher self, a mid-self, and a lower self that we are meeting in different places. Can you state any distinctions between experience or energy between the higher temple mountain types of portals, the more land, earthy, Stonehenge types of portals, and then the places that are perhaps below ground that offer the same experience of a portal?
They all pretty much range in the same area. They all achieve the same effect. The only difference is that when you go up to a very high mountain range and you find a sacred cave, for example, in the Andes, which are about 12,000 feet, the only difference is the air is much more rarefied, which means that you're already 1 foot away in the fairy world. And then you have to also chew coca leaf all day long just to put enough oxygen in your blood vessels so you can stay alive. So all the locals are chewing this stuff legally, I should say, all day long. They all look like camels with their mouths going backwards and forwards all day long. So the only difference is that the air, the atmosphere is a little bit thinner. So it does allow for a much quicker connection, and especially if you're built in a certain physical way that can accommodate that, because it's not something that everyone is comfortable with. But I find that in the Andes, the high Andes, it's much easier to sort of disconnect from physical reality and enter this other world, almost without effort, I should say. And because you don't eat very much at high altitude, you tend to drink a lot of water, you're making your body much lighter, and the connection is much real. That's the only difference that I can find, because they all behave exactly the same way. The only real difference between them all is how they've been used over the millennia. And I really mean that literally. These things go back at least 12,000 years in some cases. And it's the amount and quality of prayer and devotion and also caretaking that's taking place at these sites that also gives you that sense of palpable feel when you go in. Some of them have been kind of misused and over touristed. Egypt, again, is a great example. I remember going to Egypt 4 times during COVID because they did not accept in their culture that this thing even existed. And they recognized, a pandemic for what it is. It's an act of God, and if it's your time to die, you die. If it's not, it's not. And they went about living life as normal. So found a bit of respite away from all of this in that part of the world. And I can remember walking past the Great Pyramid, and my group is the only group in the whole country that dared to travel. And I remember the building looking back at me and literally giving out a big sigh of relief. It's like the building is so exhausted from the pointless and I should say frivolous attention it gets from mass tourism, because people go there and just take pictures of themselves with the pyramid as a backdrop. That's not what it's about. You're actually not using the temple, and you're actually degrading the quality of the temple. So the idea to go to these places and venerate them properly, give a little bit of thanks, leave a little bit of your energy behind, as though you're leaving a flower or you're watering a plant, because that's how the temple keeps going. A little bit of your electromagnetic energy infuses the temple, because it too is based on the same laws that make up the human body. So you're leaving a little packet of your own energy there. And if you multiply that by thousands of people that do go there mindfully, then the temple reacts in kind. So some places feel a little bit more potent because of the way that people like you and I treat them. And so you, in a way, drinking the thoughts and prayers and good wishes of the people that came before you, which is then added to the energy of the temple, and that's what keeps it going. And then, of course, there are those that have been left by the wayside. They've been on some forgotten track that no one's ever used for centuries. And I remember going to a very large, very tall standing stone in Wales, not far from where the blue stones from Stonehenge came from. And I found it on a map, on a footpath. And in Britain, we're very lucky. We have thousands of miles of public footpaths that cross a private land. So we can access all kinds of ancient things, holy wells, old churches, and so forth. And I remember feeling particularly drawn to go to this place in the middle of a hill, the middle of nowhere. And you can tell no one had used the track for very, very long. And I went up to the stone. And the stone kind of just reacted as though it's a living being. And I could hear it saying, thank God, someone to talk to. And I foolishly put my hand out to touch it. And I said, this stone needs to talk to somebody. It has a lot to say. Now, what you should know about these stone places is that they are piezoelectric. So they store energy. And if they haven't been grounded for quite some time, the first person that touches it gets a whopping belt of shock, which leaves your forearm in numb for 15 minutes. And that's what happened to me. And I was literally glued to the stone. A friend of mine had to actually remove me physically from the stone. And it sent me home and put me to bed. And I woke up 24 hours later, a bit more refreshed. And I couldn't stop speed talking, because I could actually replay every image and impression that happened of every event around that stone for hundreds of years. And I could see people in period costume, doing ritual weddings or giving birth or having fights or duels or going there to pray. It was like watching this incredible Cecil B. DeMille movie for 3 hours, and it kept going on and on and on. So it just shows you how some of these places are very finely tuned, that they retain the memory of everything that's there. So it's definitely worth sort of trying different ones out to see which one fits your particular way of being, because each one of them will provide something very different depending on what it is you're asking.
I want to go back to talk a little bit about the approach to some of these places, because we do live in a world where there's almost a casualness. There is a touristiness that is there for a lot of people in their spiritual jaunts, rather than the deep reverence and the devotion and the presence that's required. It's almost like there are many places that people think it is just another place to go and check off their list that I got to do this. Can you
Exactly.
talk a little bit about the energy and the devotion and the intent and innocence, again, curiosity that is required to really honor the place and also honor what's possible within that can open up by visiting such a place?
That's a good question. In fact, we always talk about sacred space. Well, what's it relative to? Profane space? And why do the two differ? Again, going back to the origin of how these things came about, the Earth is literally littered with these hotspots of energy that I entitle portals because of what they do. They transport you to a new level of reality, and they're everywhere. I mean, there's one that comes through my building, through my living room, and people always get diverted to the one place where that energy is without realizing what's there. So they're already feeling it. And we forgot about these places on the landscape as the years went by. So then we marked them with large stones, ancient temples, stone circles, and so forth, so that people today would know where they are. And the idea is to sort of connect, leave you with a certain impression and a place where you can go to whenever you feel that you've lost a plot. The Egyptians and the Indians called them these places an insurance policy, and the insurance is that when you forget that you can do this by yourself, you are led to these places, and you can again remember where you've come from. Find a place that connects you much easier with these places. And because they're living, breathing organisms and they're alive, they're sentient beings, it means that whenever you go there in a state of reverence, when you do prayer, when you're mindful, your intention is also part of the equation, where you go there with a certain frame of mind. And I usually go to these places with a sort of sense of humor. I know that people do this very seriously, but at the same time, it's good to have a bit of sense of humor about this, because I have that relationship with the spirit of place. They know exactly what I'm saying, the underlying rhythm to that humor. And you have to develop your own rhythm and your own technique to approach the spirit of place at these places. And just give them a sort of an offering. People take tobacco to these places, or water, or flowers. And sometimes, if you don't have anything, imagine that you're carrying a bouquet of flowers and literally place it down. Because what you can conceive in your mind actually happens in reality on the next level of reality. So just because you're not carrying a physical bouquet, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You can create it in your own mind, and your passion makes it real. And the spirit of place goes, well, thank you very much for thinking of me. And that's when the connection between you and the portal becomes very real. You become part of that family. You become part of that circle. And then you're very protected. And they can read you, by the way. They know your intention. They can see right through you. And if you're not ready for it, and it's not your energy to be there, you will feel discomfort, which means it's their way of saying, go to the next sacred space that we're about to suggest in your imagination, because that is your energy. And until you build up the frequency in your body, this place is not going to be much good to you. It's like sticking your fingers in the electrical socket on the wall. It's not going to do you very good. But
I'm going to pause you right there, Freddie, because we have to go to a commercial break. My guest today is Freddy Silva. He's a best-selling author and leading researcher of ancient civilizations, restricted history, sacred sites, and their interaction with consciousness. He has written a book called Portals, Energetic Doorways to Mystical Experiences Between Worlds, part of the Common Sentience series, and he explores these themes throughout the first section of this book. The second section of the book has a variety of stories, including Freddy's own, about different portal spaces that have been entered and the experiences that have been had. And the third section of the book helps to describe the ways you can get ready to approach a portal, how you can prepare for the energy and for the space that you are about to meet. There are parameters that define a portal and how it shapes the experience of the individual with whom it interacts, while the experience itself is defined by what the individual is searching for, consciously or otherwise. There are places on the land where the laws of physics, as we understand them, behave very differently to those with their antenna extended. They feel like hotspots where the veil between worlds is thinner and the perception of overlapping realities is both apparent and intermediate. Again, the book is Portals, Energetic Doorways to Mystical Experiences Between Worlds, and you can find out more about Freddy Silva's work by going to invisibletemple.com. That's invisibletemple.com. We'll be right back after these messages.
Do you want more? More joy, more abundance, more power and presence? How would it feel to have more loving relationships, more empowered community, greater fulfillment, and life purpose? The 1111 Mastermind community inspires, empowers, guides, and supports transformation. Shift your mind, expand your heart, deepen insights, let go and chart a new course, dream a new dream. The 1111 Mastermind community is an online portal for personal transformation and soulful expansion. Go to courses.1111mag.com. That's courses.1111mag.com. Change begins with you. Let it be simple, convenient, and transformative. The time is now. Step through the 1111 gateway. Courses.1111mag.com.
Have you seen 1111? Do you wonder why certain numbers keep showing up in your life? 11, 111, 22, 33, 444. People all over the world are seeing 1111 and learning the language of universal communication. Subscribe to 1111 Magazine today. www.1111mag.com. 1111 Magazine is a bi-monthly print publication that offers a rich, multi-sensory experience. As you engage with experts and topics of consciousness, become enlightened, empowered, and energized, so you live a passionate and authentic life of conscious choices. 1111 Magazine, a daily staple for lifting the mindset, discovering the heart, and stepping into conscious living. 1111 Magazine. Order now at www.1111mag.com. 1111mag.com.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. Simran is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
Before we get back to Freddy Silva and portals, I wanted to mention that I have reopened individual mentoring for 1 and 2 year individuals that want to really go on a deep dive, particularly into the work of the latest trilogy that I've written. If you're really wanting to uncover the cycle of blessings that you encounter throughout your life, that your identity has to cope through, as well as the illusions that are derailing your personal power, purpose, and peace, and expand the levels of humanity and kindness within so that you can experience more grace in the world, I'd love to work with you and invite you to go to my website at IamSimran.com. You can find the Self-Realization Trilogy there, as well as the mentoring options. My guest today is Freddy Silva, and we are talking about the latest Common Sentience book, titled Portals, Energetic Doorways to Mystical Experiences Between Worlds. I want you to go to his website and you can explore all of the things he does. He has numerous other books that are quite powerful and many other things that he offers. That is invisibletemple.com, invisibletemple.com. Egyptian priests remarked, "We will continue building temples until people recognize they are the temple," to which they added an inscription, "The temple shall act as a magical protector for you, in heaven and in earth, unfailingly and regularly and eternally." They were right, for nothing is more powerful than a person in regular contact with the cosmos. This is from Freddy Silva's book, and I invite you to grab it. It's quite fascinating, everything that he shares, and he also has a full section where he teaches how to prepare yourself more to be able to go to these sacred sites and open your energy, your mind, your body, your heart to all that can be possible when you go. And Freddie, we had a really interesting segment at the end where you talked about preparing oneself and the energy and devotion and intent of going into a space properly. And yet there's also this other part that takes place when you approach portals, and it's not necessarily something you can prepare, like people's pineal glands being activated, or an electromagnetic field, or a different electrical kind of charge like you spoke of when touching the rock. Can you speak a little bit about these sensations and what takes place? Is there any way that we should handle that when those things happen?
Oh, I call it, in very technical terms, getting the tingly winglies. And and it's true because your body is largely electromagnetic by nature. We have a big electrical current running through every part and every fiber of the body. And the temples are built exactly in the same way. Even holy wells are the conjunction of a spring and these paths of electromagnetism that we call telluric currents. Some people call them ley lines, which actually is a wrong term. But they also refer to them as the serpent roads, the ferry paths, the lungmei. It depends on which culture you are. And the idea is that you're basically entering an area that's a larger version of yourself, of your own body. We are a representation of the planet that gave us birth. And so we are like a macrocosm of the bigger picture. So in essence, when you're walking into a portal, a hotspot of energy, a temple, you're walking to a larger version of yourself. And if you're a little bit more aware of your environment, and people who are more sensitive will understand what I'm saying, they will sense that they've gone through this sort of gossamer of like a bit like saran wrap. That's how I like to describe it. It's like you're touching saran wrap. And if you put your fingers out and your palms of your hand out, those are the most sensitive parts of your body. And you will get this tingling feeling, if you're aware, that touches your fingertips. And that frequency goes right through your body. It's almost like you're getting chills up your spine, and you literally are. Because suddenly your electrical current, when it touches the perimeter, which is like a big ripple that protects every temple on the face of the earth, you pass through that ripple and it ripples right through your body. So this is where the tingly winglies come in, and you start getting this sense that something has just happened. You've entered a completely different environment. And that one of the techniques that I tell people, and I like to play tricks with people sometimes. We take ourselves way too seriously. Because they'll say, well, I don't know how sensitive I am. I said, well, let's find out. Name me 10 sounds that you can remember in the last 15 minutes. If they can get past 2, I am astonished. And rarely does anybody remember more than 2 sounds, including their own footsteps or the door closing behind them. And I said, right, that's not going to work very well for you in sacred space and in these hotspots of energy. What you want to do is become more mindful of the space, extend your aura out, because if your aura is extended, that's your electrical field that's going out beyond you like a big ripple. And the ripple of energy that's protecting the temple will reach out to you, and there's an exchange of information between the 2 ripples. So now go back out. I want you to go walk about for 15 minutes and be aware of every possible sound. Reach out with your hearing. And once you do that, what happens is that your vision follows as well. So when they come back, I said, right, now tell me 10 sounds that you heard during your 15-minute walk. and you can't get them to stop talking. I said, congratulations, you're now mindful. And it's amazing how that one simple exercise makes you sensitive to your environment. So once you're at that level, it means that you can interact with these sacred spaces much more easily. You can sense them. You can sense the polarity of energy, whether they're masculine or feminine. And because the masculine ones tend to be a bit more pushy, just like masculine energy tends to be. And the feminine energy tends to be much more lulling, like a nice grandmother that you want to hang out with. And it's just one polarity of energy compared to the other. One's not better than the other. And it really depends on what your body can handle that brings you closer to these spaces and how you handle the energy of the site and what you can get out of it. It's about the a resonant frequency that happens in the landscape. Two radio stations connecting along the dial, sharing the same kind of music. So that's essentially what goes on in terms of the interaction between you and sacred space.
The shadow side to spirituality is an escapist point of view, or someone that's really intent on having an experience, that they're controlling it so much with their personal will. What you're talking about is much more expanded and much more of a level of presence. So would you say that very strong will and intent to have an experience or to escape, or this dire desire to ascend the planet, is actually constricting the energy so that a person would not be able to remember the sounds within the past 10 minutes or tap into the larger auric field that is around them?
Yeah, no, you're right, 100% right. And again, when I was learning all of this over 30 years ago, I was very lucky to have some teachers that made me fall flat on my face, make a complete ass of myself, and then get up and brush the dust and they'll say, well, you kind of, what you wanted is because you wanted the experience, because you wanted to feel special. I said, yes. And I mean, at the time, I also had a very low self-esteem, so that didn't help. So, of course, I wanted to see fairies. Of course, I wanted to have an experience with gods and all kinds of things, and then go and talk about it to my friends. Well, that's my ego talking, and that's my fear. That's not going to help you. And I always, again, advise people not to take any expectation to these places. If you go there with the expectation, that means you want something out of it. Well, guarantee that you will get an experience. You will see stuff. But it's your own projection from your own body creating this in your own mind, and it's totally, well, fake. And it it'll make you feel good for a few seconds, but it doesn't really help you in the end. So you might as well go there and expect nothing, but ask a question, find out what it is that is taking you to these places, go there with a certain intention and let it go. And I guarantee you that whether it happens immediately or within a few minutes or within a day or maybe a week, it depends where you are on the sort of the ladder of the development. There's no right or wrong. We're all at different levels of apprenticeship. The information comes in the form of meetings with people that suddenly sit next to you at a pub, and they'll start talking about something that was exactly what you were looking for. This is where the magic happens. There'll be images or visions or certain words and phrases that it's like someone whispering in your ear. And you start writing this stuff down and you think, that's funny. That's kind of related to what I was just asking. But that's coming from a real place. That's coming from the memory of the place that said, oh, I've got the information that you're looking for. I got the answer to that. And when you're ready, I'm going to whisper it to you. And those are the things to watch out for, because then you start writing it down. And in my case, this is where most of my research begins. It's by asking an innocent question about a temple and saying, what's this all about? Which is my way of getting around a very complex situation. What's this all about? And they know exactly what I mean, and they know exactly what I'm asking. And I'll just go away, I'll walk around. Sometimes I'll take my camera and do a bit of photography. It's my way of relaxing and shutting off my brain, and it really works for me. Some people would go there and they dance. Some people play music. It depends on your tool of preference. You have to be comfortable with it, with your own tools. And then I just walk away, say thank you. Nothing's happened. And as I'm walking back through a forest towards my car, suddenly all these voices are coming in my head, and this wonderful information and images are being given to me. And I quickly write them down before I forget. and I go home and research them. I spend a year or two in libraries finding the information, and it's there. And then a book comes out of it. So I'm using that for my own development spiritually, but also for the work that I do, so I can become better at it. So this is what I mean about sort of using these places as a tool that empowers you in whatever it is that you're looking for.
Between the last segment and now, you've said certain words that seem really important for that spiritual exploration, and they were words like magic, curiosity, wonder, innocence, playfulness, no expectation. All of these things allow us to open to a vaster field than what our minds could typically tap into. And in the book, you talk about studies where people go to certain places and they literally disappear, not their bodies necessarily, but it's as if they've left and time is missing. Can you talk a little bit about these time lapses that take place, even to the point where their timepiece has left and one has been taken and they're different when they come back?
Yeah, there was these connections with sacred space. If you happen to be with a partner right now and they're not developing at the same rate as you are, you'll find that when you go off to one of these hotspots and you think, I'm just going to take a picture, and you come back 2 hours later, I can tell you it's the highest point of divorce rates that exists, and the reason why people get so divorced, because it does frustrate the partners who are not on the same level of development. And I've seen that a lot, and that also happened to me too. So with all of these anecdotes that were popping up out of the woodwork, there was one guy who was living in Wales, in a place called the Hill of Angels, which should be a warning as to what happens there. It's a place on the landscape where the type of stone and the location of the hill creates this incredible energetic environment where people really are away with the angels and with the fairies, because you're walking into this rarefied world. But when you cross the perimeter between our level of reality and the other world, the time doesn't really exist in the way that we understand it. So he began to notice that people were complaining about missing time on top of this mountain in Wales. And he began to sit at the base of the mountain. I think he did this for about a year, which is kudos to him, because it rains a lot in that part of the world. And I can imagine him sitting at the bottom of the hill, handing out these watches, which were all digital. You can't really wind them forward or backwards. And he said, just take this up to the top of the hill and hand it back to me when you're finished, if you don't mind. That's all he said. And the clocks would be synchronized with the one that he had at the base. And when they came back, there would be anything between 5 to 20 minutes difference between the two timepieces. And it basically validated what a lot of scientists were saying about some of these hotspots, is that the gravitational field of the Earth behaves a little bit differently. It's a little bit weaker or stronger depending on the time of day and the time of month. And that means that it will influence time, or at least our understanding and perception of time. Because we know that time is not a constant, and light is also not a constant. There are at least 3 different speeds of light, which means you're going to have 3 different speeds of measurable time. So it's another way to show that when you're entering these particular portals, there is a difference between the physical and the non-physical, which is now also measurable. So it's very gratifying to see so many scientists now beginning to take a look at this mumbo jumbo, as they call it, and realizing, well, wait a minute, maybe these people are not making this up. Something literally is happening to them at these places that can be proven geologically and also mathematically and scientifically. And in some cases, and very rare cases, I know one in Peru, actually, no, this is almost on the Bolivia border on Lake Titicaca. There's one particular portal, which is a false door in the shape of a T, and it's been carved out of the side of a mountain. Now, that T literally exemplifies the Tao, which means the breath of God. And it's a culturally shared symbol that you'll find all around the world. So here you are up in the Andes with this T-shaped door that goes absolutely nowhere. It's about 2 feet deep, carved into the vertical sandstone cliff. And I was just there with my group, and my guide, who's an Aymara elder, he looks at me, and I looked at him and I said, you don't look very comfortable here, neither do I, because we were there a little bit late in the day. And he says, yeah, I don't like coming here late in the day because the energy is like I'm being sucked in for the wrong reasons. we should come back in the morning. And I said, I totally agree. I feel the same way. And we came back in the morning, and it was a completely different, much more feminine, much more lulling energy, and much more comfortable. And I was speaking to the local villagers, and they said, only a couple of weeks ago at this spot, we had another small group that came here, and one of the guys put his forehead to the door, put his literally touched the doorway, and he physically went through the doorway, and he came back 2 days later. So obviously the tour guides were very concerned about this. How are you going to explain this to the police or the hotel? The police were involved. They're saying, well, did you kill this guy? No. I mean, all the groups said no. He literally vanished into the doorway. And even the police were saying, well, we're not supposed to tell you this, but we understand, because even we don't like coming here because weird things come out of this portal. And they actually used that word. And the people dressed in strange period costumes appear. They go towards Lake Titicaca, and then they come back and they vanish in this blue light. And 2 days later, this guy shows up. They found him. Another group found him. He was completely dazed. I mean, he was a little bit shaken, but untouched, because the experience was absolutely real. He'd gone into the other side of reality. He was there for a goodly amount of time, and he was still trying to make sense of what happened. So even though he's a bit discombobulated, he went on to have some incredible dreams about the experience. And he said, no, it's different. I haven't been harmed, but it does scare the life out of you because you weren't expecting it to happen. So that's one case that I know personally where there are incidences where these things do happen physically. And and the more time that I listen to indigenous people around the world who literally are much closer to the subtle universe than we are, they understand exactly what's going on. And they keep saying there was a point of time thousands of years ago when there were other people who really mastered this art of the universe, the laws of nature, they called it, and they were able to physically go into these portals and appear in other parts of the universe. And they keep mentioning the belt stars of Orion throughout virtually every culture I've researched. And they came to the conclusion that there's a kind of an umbilical cord that connects the Earth to the belt stars of Orion, like a big railway junction. And from there, you can go anywhere else in the universe. And the funny thing is, in 2008, NASA released a press release that said, and I quote, there are magnetic portals that exist on the face of the Earth that open every 8 minutes that go up to the atmosphere. They create an X point to the solar winds, and then they go all the way to the sun and possibly beyond. And the funny thing is, the Tamil culture of the southern India in 9600 BC wrote about that. And they describe it as the serpents that move along the ground that are mirrored in the sky, that are the arrows of sorcerers. So again, modern technology catching up with the ancient systems of understanding that the Earth doesn't exist by itself. It's tethered to other levels of reality, and some places on the land allow you to achieve that.
We have just a couple of minutes left in the show, but you write in the book, and you've said it throughout the show, these spaces are alive. The breath of a sacred place, you've been interacting not with a pile of soil, but with a living energy body. You begin to treat such places with greater reverence. A portal is a step into 1,000 journeys. Can you speak a little bit about the breath that exists throughout the earth, and especially within all of these portal spaces in a couple of minutes?
Actually, the Hopi said it better than me. They have a creation myth where they said that when the Creator made the earth, it basically sent one of the first humans down to the South Pole with a drum. And this human starts hearing the heartbeat of the Earth Mother, starts beating the same rhythm on his drum. And when the two achieve a sympathetic resonance, the Earth becomes filled with and abundant with energy and sends these streams of life force from the core to the surface. And the Earth becomes abundant with life. But they said, some places became more abundant with this energy than all these other places, and they became known as the spots of the fawn. And it paints a lovely picture of the earth as a sentient being, as an animal that has these little spots, which when you find them and when you step on them, you literally connect back to the source of things. You become a sorcerer for another level of another interpretation of the word. And It's these moments where the breath of life literally connects with the breath of the human body, and the two become one. And again, if you put yourself in a place of reverence and acceptance, you begin to make the best of your time on the planet by interacting with something much greater than the sum of your parts, which takes you into this myriad of invisible realities. I had people asking me, well, I wish these things existed in New York City. I said, well, they do. All you have to do is go around to Central Park. There's a glacial erratic with big scratches on it overlooking this lake. And that actually sits on a hot spot of energy. And you'd be amazed at how quickly you can sit there and forget that you are in this bustling metropolis, because the forces at work there are working on you. The other one is a big obelisk placed behind the museum of the Metropolitan Museum. And it was brought there from Egypt by a group of Scottish Rite Freemasons who also know about exactly what we're talking about, because they practice the same thing. And if you're in the vicinity, in the periphery of this obelisk, you're also getting that hit of energy. So these things appear everywhere, down to the point where I have one in my living room as well. Even my local coffee shop, the building from the 1800s was built on an old Abenaki sacred site. And the person that runs the shop, and I know her very well, and I asked her, did you pick this because of financial reasons for foot traffic, or was there something else? And she says, it was for something else. And you know what I'm talking about. I said, yeah, because I would rather have my coffee here than anybody else. I feel so comfortable here. And I did a bit of research on the history of Portland, Maine, and I found that, yes, there was a place downtown around the vicinity of that coffee shop that used to be an Abenaki sacred site. So in a way, we're drinking the thoughts and prayers of the native people that hang out there before.
Mm-hmm. A portal is a point of possibility, a step into 1,000 journeys, a springboard from the known into the unknown. Freddy Silva says that we incarnate from the invisible universe to experience an unknown world, Earth, yet spend much of the experience on Earth making sense of the known by seeking answers in the unknown. It is the stuff of Zen. If we accept that accessing a portal allows for the discovery of our origins, it follows that the memory of what is retrieved will assist us in understanding the plan we have chosen to follow. This is from the book Portals, Energetic Doorways to Mystical Experiences Between Worlds by Freddy Silva. You can find out more about him at invisibletemple.com. I invite you to explore this latest release from the Common Sentience series and look up many of their other books, along with my own within the series, signed Sacred Encounters with Pathways, Turning Points, and Divine Guideposts. Thank you, Freddy, for being on 1111 Talk Radio. Until next week, I am Simran, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living here on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Remember, you are not on the journey. You are the journey.